All right, we are now going to move on to the final topic in this workspace or this unit, and it is called surface area. In the last lesson, we looked at area, which was essentially, if I put it in the wrapping paper example again, how much wrapping paper to cover the surface of your desk. It's a way to measure how much is needed to cover something. But that was on a flat desk, that's one surface. Surface area is when you need to calculate the area of the entire outer surface of an object. In other words, if I keep going with the wrapping paper example, you have a box, like the example right down here, and you need to calculate the area or determine how much wrapping paper is needed to completely cover that shape. And if you look at that, there are 6 sides. So we are going to give you the formulas here, and it is up to you to calculate the final answers. I want you to realize, though, that the formulas are in your data booklet, your data sheet, whatever you want to call it. What you need to know how to do, though, is calculate. So you don't have to remember, you just have to know how to use it. So let's move on to a rectangular solid. And the formula that we're going to use is right here. And believe me, it is not complicated. It might look complicated, but believe me, it is not. All you need to do with your rectangular solid is identify the length, the width, and the height. And to go even furthermore, if by chance you kind of mess that up, it's not going to be a big deal. But let me show you what I would do. As per usual, I always start with my blank formula. So 2LW plus 2LH plus 2WH. And you're probably thinking, well, what the heck does all that mean? If I can draw your attention to this piece right here, I'll just focus on that. You'll see that the 2 is right next to the L and the W. And as I mentioned in a previous video, when you have different values right next to each other with no symbol in between them, the function is multiplication. So really what that means is 2 multiplied by length multiplied by width. So on over here, this would be 2 times length times height, and this would be 2 times width times height. I suppose now what we need to do is identify our sides. This will be my length, this will be my width, and this will be my height. And all you have to do now is plug it into this formula. So that would be surface area is equal to, and I'm going to leave out meters, I'll try to write really small. So it's going to be 2, I'm going to use a little dot for multiply. That dot is the same as an X. So 2 times 15 times 6, and those are both in meters, plus 2 times your length, which is going to be 15 times your height, which is 12 meters, plus 2 times 6 meters times 12 meters. Now, so how the heck do you get to your final answer? Your final answer appears to be 684 meters squared. Here's what I want to tell you. Do your multiplication first. Your adding is last. And here's what I mean. Figure out what this means first, the 2 times your length times your width. And what that gives you is a value of 180. Then I put my plus sign. What was the 2 times the length times the height? Well, that gave you 360. Finally, what is this value when they're all multiplied together? That's 2 times your width times your height, which gave you a value of 144. When you add those all together, you get a surface area value of 684 meters squared. Please keep in mind that I did have my units of meters, and I did square that value because it is an area. So, again, it's not an overly complicated example. The formula is not too bad. I think you understand what you're doing. You just have to basically take your cube and say, okay, well, this is going to be my length, my width, and my height. And for what it's worth, if by chance you were to mix that up, this formula is designed in a way that it will not, you'll still end up with the right answer. So what I mean by that is if by chance, let's say you said this was your length and this was your width and this was your height, you just so happen to be able to get the right answer still by using this formula. But generally, I think since you were in junior high, you've been able to identify that we call this our length, our width, and up and down is your height. Okay, those are your three values. If we move on now to a cube where every side is the same, I think what I'm going to do is, actually, it's not that hard of a formula. It's just a little bit different because of the fact that every side is the same. So surface area is 6s squared. So what does that mean? It means 6 times s squared. Okay, well, what do we do with this? Well, why is there a 6? 6 is represented, there are 6 sides to this cube. So what we're going to do is we're going to have 6 multiplied by s. What does s stand for? That is the length of the side. Now you'll notice we have a cube. So in this case, every side is the exact same length. So we're going to put 7, and don't forget to add the squared. Now what you have a problem with here is, well, what the heck do you do first? Do you multiply? Do you do 7 squared? Long story short, you might remember BEDMAS. And you typically, when you calculate, you go from left to right. And you'll remember brackets, exponents, divide, multiply, add, subtract. So if you have a choice between exponents and multiplication, the exponent comes first. And what I mean is, this becomes 6 times 7 squared. When you calculate that, should give you 49. And final answer is going to be 294 centimeters squared. That is the surface area of the entire shape. If you have trouble with this squared value or getting the right answer in your calculator, please speak with your teacher. We're going to move on now to a cylinder, and maybe again you're thinking, oh my goodness, what a long formula. Please don't worry about that too much. I mean, the formula is given to you. You just have to have practice with how to input values and get the right answer out. So I'll show it. It's very simple. So surface area equals 2 pi r h plus 2 pi r squared. Well, so what do all these letters mean? Well, 2 is 2, that's fine. We know what pi is. We're going to use that from our calculator. What does r mean? R is radius, as per usual. We should be getting used to that now from our circumference formula and area of a circle formula. And then all we have left is h, and to me, h means height. Let's fill in our values. So if you look at this portion of the formula, everything is right next to each other with nothing in between. So that means multiplication. So it's going to be 2 times pi times your radius, which is 3 inches, times your height, which is 9 inches, plus, now we have to do this side, 2 times pi times your radius squared. So 3 inches squared. The only piece of advice here I'll give you is calculate this side first, write it down, calculate this side separately, and then add them. So if you go 2 times pi times radius times h, that will give you 169.65. Added 2. Now, let's be careful here with how we do this. I just told you on the last page that order of operations does matter. So what I would recommend is I would go, there's this square right here. Now the radius value is 3 and you have to square it. So my advice to each of you is to type into your calculator 3 squared, then multiply that by 2 and multiply that by pi, which gives you an answer of 56.55. Final answer is 226.2 inches squared, 226 inches squared. Nothing there is too difficult. I can see maybe a bit of an issue with that squared value. Again, make sure as I'm doing this that you can get the 226.2 inches squared out of your calculator. You've got to be okay doing that. The only difference here, I just wanted to show you kind of, if you look at this, this is a cylinder or a pop can. Sometimes they will give you the diameter, because you can see here in the formula, the overall formula uses R, or radius. So just make sure that if you had this, whatever the formula looks like, you're going to have to use the radius value, and the radius is 7 centimeters. Or in other words, it's just half of the diameter. Okay, you have now the surface area of a cone. Again, not a big deal. Formula is given to you. You just have to know how to input it. So, sorry, I just dropped my pen. I'll just erase that. So you have here surface area equals pi rs plus pi r squared. The one that you're thinking here is, well, the one that I haven't seen before is S. S means slant height. Okay, well, what the heck is a slant height? Slant height is the height of the slanted side of the cone. And in this case, that value is 9. So let me show you how I calculate this. Maybe I'll just kind of do it over here. So I'll go, it would be pi times 6 centimeters times your slant height of 9 centimeters added to pi times 6 centimeters times, 6 centimeters squared, I apologize. Again, what you want to do is multiply each of these separately and then add them. So the pi times r times s gives you 169.65. Added to, now you have to do this one, it's pi radius squared. Just like with the last one, I recommend that you do the radius squared part first. So I would go 6 squared and then multiply that by pi, and that gives you 113.10. Add them together, 282.75 centimeters squared, and that is how you calculate the surface area of a cone. You can see that it's becoming somewhat repetitive. I mean, the letters might change, but the calculation technique is the same. Surface area of a sphere, essentially, like imagine you were wrapping up a basketball in wrapping paper. That's the area. You want to figure how much does it take to cover that ball, that perfect sphere. Formula here is actually a little bit easier. Surface area is 4 pi r squared. And again, they're all right next to each other, so we do have multiplication. So it's 4 multiplied by pi multiplied by 5 squared. As per usual, I see this square and I like to do that first. So I would go in my calculator, 5 squared times 4 times pi, and that should give you 314.16 meters squared. Hopefully you're getting the hang of this now. Please speak to your teacher if by some chance you just can't get the right answer in your